Today we'll continue with our iOS interview series and create an extension on UIImageView that lets us easily fetch remote images and manages a cache of previously fetched images without relying on external dependencies like Alamo Fire or Kingfisher. The short implementation is perfect for personal projects and interview assessments. If that seems interesting to you, stick around. In Xcode here, I've created an empty UIImageView extension. Let's create a function that will fetch a remote image from a URL and will return the URL session data task responsible for fetching that image. Now, it'll need to take in the URL to load the image from and a potential placeholder image. So it might look something like this. We're making the URL session data task optional here because if the image already exists in our cache or the URL is invalid, we won't be returning a new URL session data task. Or if you can imagine an image view in a cell, you might want to cancel or pause fetching an image when the cell is scrolled off screen. Similarly, if we have a table view with cells in them, as a cell gets reused, it would briefly show the previous image before the new image is assigned and the view is updated. So the first thing we need to do is we need to nil out the previous image to prevent this UI side effect. Next, we need to create a cache. Now, by declaring this variable outside of the extension, it's available throughout our application. And there are cache implementations with more advanced functionality than this, but this video is going to focus primarily on fetching and showing the images. Now that we have our cache, we first need to check if the URL we're trying to load already exists in our cache. If it does, we can just return it directly. So the code would look something like this. We try and check the cache for the image. If it exists, in the sense that it's not nil, we'll go ahead and assign it directly and return early. Then we just need to validate that the URL is valid, and if so, we can set our placeholder image while we wait for the networking request to finish. So here we're checking that the URL is in fact valid, and we can construct it. Then, if that's the case, we'll go ahead and assign the placeholder image while we set up the networking request. So here's the full network request. It's actually fairly simple. We'll send out a data task, and once we get the response back, we'll convert it to a UI image, save it to our cache, and update the image view to reflect the newly fetched image. Now, since updating the image is a UI task, we have to do this on a main thread. The final piece is to call resume on the data task and return it. So we can just replace these last few lines like this. So now this completes our implementation. But there's one additional thing that we can add here. At the function declaration, we can go ahead and add discardable result. And what this is saying is that though this function returns a value, we might not really care about it. So the compiler will not yell at you for not doing something with the return value of the function. So it's just the shorthand that lets us potentially use or ignore this return value wherever we see fit. So let's see all of this in action. So let me show you some of the additions that I've made to this project. In the assets folder, I have the channel logo as a placeholder, and then I've created a new UI table view controller called gallery view controller that contains gallery cells. A gallery cell is pretty simple. So if we go to the storyboard, you can see that it's a very vanilla table view controller with a custom cell and an image view that goes to its edges. And I have fixed its height to be 150 pixels high, just because I don't want to deal with aspect ratio and all of that in this video. So apart from that, we just have a data source of some hard-coded strings, and self row at index path is just passing that particular index to this function, which will then try and load it. So let's go ahead and run it. So you'll see that we see the placeholder image, and now all of these images are loaded. And if I scroll, you can see that it's very responsive, so you know immediately that it's not trying to make new web requests to load these images behind the scenes. It's using the cached version. So this is a quick demo of all of this in action. Hopefully you found this useful, and if you'd like to see more content like this, please leave a comment in the area below about what you would like to see next. Otherwise, if this was helpful to you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks.